The silence was the strangest part. After 3 years of constant warfare, of alarms and explosions and screams, the silence felt unnatural. Ji-won stood in the ruins of what had once been Seoul, looking at the empty streets, the burned buildings, the memorial walls covered with names of the dead. So many names, too many to ever truly count. The war had ended 6 months ago. The surviving Zelthari forces had surrendered after the failed final assault. 72 ships, 12,000 soldiers. All that remained of the mighty fleet that had come to conquer Earth. They sat now in detention camps on Mars, waiting while humanity decided what to do with them. Ji-won had been appointed Earth's first ambassador to the galaxy. It was a strange title for a world that had no contact with the galaxy anymore. The gates were gone. The Zelthari networks destroyed or abandoned. Earth was alone in the cosmos, exactly as humanity had chosen when they weaponized the gate. But the galaxy had not forgotten Earth. News of the war had spread across 100 worlds. Other species had watched through intercepted broadcasts, through refugee reports, through the accounts of the few Zelthari traders who escaped before the Empire closed its borders. They had watched primitive humans fight the greatest military power in the galaxy to a standstill. Ji-won reviewed the final casualty figures for her report. The numbers were obscene. 4,700,000,000 humans dead. More than half of humanity erased in 3 years. Earth's major cities destroyed. The environment poisoned by radiation, bioweapons, and chemical warfare. Entire regions that would be uninhabitable for centuries. But Earth had survived. Barely, desperately, at a cost that would haunt humanity for generations. But they had survived. The Zelthari losses were even worse. The 300,000 soldiers who died in the gate collapse. The 200,000 killed in combat over 3 years. The supply worlds that Captain Young-sik's Ghost Fleet had destroyed, causing famines that killed billions of Zelthari civilians. The rebellions that erupted across the Empire, inspired by Earth's resistance, claiming countless more lives. Some estimates put the total death toll at over 8 trillion beings. The bloodiest war in galactic history, all because the Zelthari Empire had opened a gate to Earth. Ji-won prepared her broadcast to the galaxy. Humanity had captured a Zelthari long-range communication array and repaired it. The message would reach every corner of known space, whether anyone wanted to hear it or not. She stood before the camera, wearing the simple uniform of Earth's unified government. Behind her, projected images showed the devastation. The burned cities, the memorial walls, the mass graves. The truth of what the war had cost. "My name is Ji-won," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I speak for the people of Earth, for humanity. 3 years ago, the Zelthari Empire opened a dimensional gate to our world. They came with demands. They came with threats. They believed we were primitive. They believed we were weak. They believed we would surrender or be easily conquered." She paused, letting the images behind her speak. "They were wrong. We did not surrender, we fought, we bled. We died in numbers that defy comprehension. But we did not break. We learned your technology. We adapted to your tactics. We became something you did not expect. We became your nightmare." The images changed, showing captured footage of human attacks. Augmented soldiers fighting Zelthari warriors. Improvised weapons destroying advanced ships. The gate collapse that killed 300,000 in seconds. "You thought we were prey," Ji-won continued. "You thought because we had not yet reached the stars we were harmless. You did not understand that Earth is a world where every species fights for survival. Where evolution is war. Where we spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. When you came to conquer us, you brought that war to yourselves." She looked directly into the camera. "This is our message to the galaxy. Leave Earth alone. We do not want your gates. We do not want your contact. We do not want your empire or your civilization. We want to be left in peace to rebuild what you destroyed. If you come to Earth again, if you open another gate to our system, we will respond the only way we know how, with total, unrestrained, unlimited violence. We will burn your worlds. We will destroy your ships. We will make you count your dead for generations." The images changed again, showing the memorial walls, billions of names carved in stone. These are our dead, 4,700,000,000 humans who will never see the stars, who died defending their home against invaders. Remember them. Remember what it cost to attack Earth. And remember that we are still here, wounded, diminished, but undefeated. Jiwan ended the transmission. The message would take weeks to reach the far edges of the galaxy, but it would reach them. Everyone would know what happened when the Zelthari opened a gate to Earth. On Mars, Ambassador Sumin worked with the detained Zelthari prisoners. She had been appointed to oversee their treatment, to ensure humanity did not become the monsters the war had made them capable of being. It was difficult work. The Zelthari had killed billions of humans. Many wanted revenge. Many wanted to simply execute every prisoner. But Dong Hyun, now Earth's military commander and de facto leader, had made a different decision. If we slaughter prisoners, we become no better than they are, he had said. We will hold them. We will put them on trial for war crimes, but we will not murder them. That is not who we are. That is not who we will allow ourselves to become. Sumin interviewed the prisoners, documenting their accounts of the war. She spoke with soldiers who had fought on Luna, with officers who had commanded ships with War Master Chulwu before he died of injuries sustained in the final battle. Their stories were remarkably similar. They had expected an easy conquest. They had found hell instead. We never imagined primitives could fight like you did, one officer told her. We are trained warriors. We have conquered 73 worlds. But you humans fought like you had nothing to lose. Like death did not matter. It was terrifying. Death mattered, Sumin replied quietly. Every death mattered. But we understood something you did not. When the choice is between death fighting and death surrendering, we will always choose to fight. That is what it means to be human. In the orbital shipyards above Earth, engineer Tae Yang oversaw the construction of humanity's first true warships. Not converted civilian vessels or improvised weapons, but purpose-built military spacecraft designed using everything humanity had learned from 3 years of desperate warfare. The ships were sleek and deadly, combining human innovation with captured Zelthari technology. They had proper energy shields, plasma weapons, advanced sensors, faster-than-light capability. In 3 years, humanity had climbed from barely reaching their moon to building interstellar warships. We are building 30 of these ships, Tae Yang explained to Dong Hyun during an inspection. Enough to defend our system from any threat. Enough to make anyone think twice before approaching Earth. Dong Hyun looked at the warships taking shape in the construction bays. We swore we would never let this happen again. Never let an enemy get this close to destroying us. These ships are our promise to future generations. Earth will never be defenseless again. The ships were named after the heroes who had fallen in the war. The Kyungsoo, the Youngho, the Chulwu. Names that would remind humanity of what the war had cost and why they could never allow it to happen again. Across the galaxy, the Zelthari Empire was collapsing. The war with Earth had broken something fundamental in imperial power. The rebellions that started during the conflict had spread like fire. Dozens of conquered worlds rose up, emboldened by humanity's example. If primitives from Earth could bloody the Empire, surely they could win their freedom. The Empire fought, desperately to maintain control, but the damage was done. The aura of invincibility was shattered. The myth of imperial supremacy was revealed as just that, a myth. Within 5 years of the war's end, the Zelthari Empire would fragment into a dozen smaller states, ending 10,000 years of dominance. And everywhere, a new saying spread among the conquered peoples. Never open a gate to a death world, never wake a sleeping predator, never ever invade Earth. In the Zelthari Imperial Archives, now accessible to researchers from former subject species, the full casualty count was documented. The report was thousands of pages long, listing every death, every destroyed ship, every ruined world. The numbers were still being compiled 5 years after the war ended. They were still counting the dead. The report's conclusion was simple and devastating. The invasion of Terra 9, known to its inhabitants as Earth, represents the single greatest military disaster in Imperial history. Total casualties exceed 8 trillion beings across multiple species. The cost in materials, ships, and resources is incalculable. The political consequences include the collapse of imperial authority and the loss of hundreds of subject worlds. Recommendation: classify all information about Earth as forbidden. Establish permanent exclusion zone around their star system. Never attempt contact again. On Earth, humanity rebuilt. It would take generations to heal the wounds. EA. The shuttle ride to the Velcrin command ship felt like ascending into a nightmare. Ambassador Minji sat strapped into a seat designed for alien bodies, surrounded by armed Velcrin guards whose weapons never pointed away from her. She had volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be a one-way trip. Earth needed someone to look the enemy in the eye and buy time for the military to prepare. The interior of the Velcrin vessel was cold and utilitarian. Metal walls hummed with alien power systems. The air smelled wrong, processed through filters meant for different biology. The guards led her through corridors where other Velcrin stopped to stare at the primitive creature from the primitive world. She kept her head high and her expression calm, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Commander Velthar waited in what appeared to be a conference chamber. He was larger than she expected, easily twice her height with scales that shimmered under the artificial lights. His eyes were intelligent and utterly without mercy. Ambassador Minji of the nation called South Korea, he said through the translation device. You have been chosen to speak for your world? I speak for Earth, she corrected. Not just one nation. All of humanity stands together in response to your ultimatum. Velthar made a sound that might have been laughter. Humans, you call yourselves that? How interesting. Most species name themselves after their homeworld, but then most species are unified by the time we discover them. You remain fractured, fighting among yourselves even as you face extinction. We are not fractured anymore, Minji said quietly. You unified us. Thank you for that. The Velcrin commander's expression changed slightly. That was not the response he expected. You are here to negotiate the terms of your surrender. I am here to reject your ultimatum. Silence fell over the chamber. The Velcrin guards shifted, their weapons rising slightly. Velthar leaned forward, studying her with renewed interest. You reject it? Do you understand what you are saying? We have 300 warships in orbit around your planet. We can destroy your cities from space. We can boil your oceans. We can crack your planet like an egg. And you have nothing that can reach us. Then why offer us 72 hours? Minji asked. If you are so powerful, why not just attack? Why give us time to prepare? Unless you are not as confident as you pretend to be. Velthar's scales darkened with anger. You are an insect speaking to a god. Your confidence is misplaced. Is it? You have attacked thousands of worlds, Commander. You have crushed hundreds of civilizations. But you have never attacked Earth. You do not know us. You see primitive technology and assume we are primitive people. That is a fatal mistake. Fatal for you, perhaps. Minji stood, even though every instinct screamed at her to remain seated and submissive. My government has authorized me to deliver Earth's official response to your ultimatum. We refuse all terms. We reject your authority over our world. We deny your right to conquer us. And we promise you this. If you attack Earth, you will regret it for whatever remains of your empire's existence. The chamber erupted with angry chittering from the Velcrin present. Velthar raised a hand for silence. You are declaring war on the Velcrin Empire? No, Minji said. You declared war when you came to our world and demanded our surrender. We are simply telling you that we will fight. Every human, every nation, every soldier, every civilian. We will fight until you leave or until we are all dead. Those are your only two options now. Then you have chosen death. Velthar gestured to the guards. Return her to her world. Let her people see what happens to those who defy the Empire. Back on Earth, General Taiyang coordinated the largest military operation in human history. Every nation had contributed resources, intelligence, and forces to the common defense. The planet's entire nuclear arsenal had been repurposed and repositioned. Conventional forces were mobilized. And scientists like Dr. Hune worked frantically to find any weakness in the alien technology. The ambassador is returning, an aide reported. She is unharmed. Good, Taiyang replied. That means they still think we are no threat. Let them keep thinking that for as long as possible. Captain Jinho stood on the bridge of a South Korean destroyer, now equipped with hastily modified long-range missiles. Around the world, ships like his were taking position, waiting for the order to fire. He had trained his entire life for naval warfare against human enemies. Now he would fight aliens from the stars. The absurdity of it almost made him laugh. "All stations report ready," his weapons officer said. "Good. We wait for the signal." Jinho looked at the countdown timer. 6 hours remained before the Velcrin deadline expired. 6 hours before the shooting started. In an Air Force base, Squadron Leader Yunji ran final checks on her fighter jet. Engineers had worked around the clock to install experimental railgun pods beneath the wings. The weapons had never been tested in combat, barely tested at all. But the scientists promised they would work. She had to trust them. "Squadron, this is Lead," she broadcast to her pilots. "We all know what is coming. The aliens think we cannot reach them in orbit. They think our aircraft are too primitive to be a threat. We are going to prove them wrong. Stay tight, follow your training, and remember what we are fighting for." Around the world, similar scenes played out. Soldiers checked weapons, pilots prepared for launch, submarine commanders positioned their vessels, missile crews armed their warheads, and billions of civilians huddled in shelters, praying that their military could perform a miracle. Dr. Hyun sat in a command center, surrounded by screens showing data about the Velcrin ships. He had spent the last 3 days analyzing every sensor reading, every image, every piece of information Earth satellites could gather, and he had found something. "Their shields," he explained to the generals listening. "They are designed to deflect energy weapons. Plasma, lasers, particle beams. That is what most spacefaring civilizations use. But kinetic weapons, solid projectiles, they do not defend against those as well. Their shields are weak against physical impacts." "Why would they be weak against that?" Taeyang asked. "Because no one uses kinetic weapons in space warfare anymore," Hyun explained. "It is considered primitive, inefficient. They evolved their defenses to counter the threats they actually faced. They never considered that a civilization might still use bullets and missiles." Taeyang smiled grimly. "Then we will teach them why humans never abandoned kinetic weapons. We like things that go boom." The 72 hours expired. Commander Velthar opened a channel to broadcast his final warning to Earth. "People of Earth, your time is finished. You have rejected our mercy. Now you will face our power. Your cities will burn. Your nations will fall. Your species will serve or die. This is your last chance to surrender." The response came not from a diplomat or a leader, but from General Taeyang himself, broadcasting from a secure military channel that the Velcrin could intercept. "Commander Velthar, this is General Taeyang of the Earth Defense Forces. You wanted an answer? Here it is." Around the globe, thousands of missiles launched simultaneously. Nuclear warheads, conventional explosives, experimental weapons. Everything humanity had built for destroying itself now aimed at the alien fleet. From submarines, from ships, from hidden silos, from mobile launchers, the arsenal of Earth rose toward the stars. In orbit, Velcrin sensor operators watched in confusion as the primitive chemical rockets climbed toward them. "They are attacking with missiles?" an officer said, incredulous. "Their missiles cannot even breach our shields. This is suicide." Commander Velthar was less certain. "Deploy escorts. Intercept those weapons, but there were too many missiles coming too fast." The Velcrin point defense systems engaged, destroying hundreds of the incoming projectiles. But hundreds more got through. And when the first nuclear warhead detonated against a Velcrin cruiser's shields, something unexpected happened. The shields held against the explosion, but the physical debris, the vaporized metal, the shockwave of matter it punched through, the cruiser's hull tore open. Atmosphere vented. The ship began to tumble out of control. "Shields are failing," a Velcrin operator screamed. "The kinetic impacts are overwhelming the generators." More missiles arrived. More ships died. Captain Jinho watched from his destroyer as his missiles found their targets. Squadron leader Yunji led her jets to maximum altitude, their railguns firing solid projectiles at velocities that turned them into hypervelocity penetrators. Each shot that hit went straight through Velcrin armor. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 67 Velcrin ships were destroyed or disabled. Earth had lost countless missiles, aircraft, and thousands of lives. But the alien fleet was retreating. Commander Velthar stared at his screens in disbelief. This was impossible. A primitive world had hurt them, had killed thousands of Velcrin warriors, had forced them to retreat. "Send a message to Imperial Command," he said quietly. Tell them we need reinforcements. Tell them Earth is not what we thought. The news of the Velcrin retreat spread across Earth like wildfire. In every city, people poured into the streets celebrating. They had faced the alien invaders and survived. They had fought back and won. But in military command centers around the world, the mood was far more somber. General Taiyang knew this was only the beginning. We surprised them, he told the assembled military leaders during the emergency conference. We hurt them because they did not expect primitive kinetic weapons to work. But they will adapt. They will come back with better shields, more ships, and they will not underestimate us again. How long do we have? The American general asked. Weeks. Maybe months if we are lucky. Taiyang pulled up a star chart. The Velcrin Empire controls hundreds of systems. They can call on resources we cannot imagine. We won one battle. They will win the war unless we change the rules. Around the conference table, the leaders of Earth's military forces wrestled with an impossible problem. They had revealed their trump card, used their surprise advantage, and barely scratched the enemy. What could they possibly do when the aliens returned in force? Dr. Hyun was thinking about the same problem from a different angle. In a laboratory deep beneath Seoul, he examined pieces of debris recovered from destroyed Velcrin ships. The technology was centuries ahead of anything Earth had developed, but it operated on principles he could understand. Physics was universal after all. Look at this, he said to his team, pointing at a component from a Velcrin shield generator. The energy distribution is inefficient. They are using brute force instead of elegance. Their technology is advanced but not optimized. What does that mean for us? A younger scientist asked. It means they got comfortable, Hyun replied. They stopped innovating because they did not need to. We are still innovating because we have to. That gives us an edge. He turned to the wreckage of what appeared to be a Velcrin computer core. If we can understand their systems, we can find more weaknesses. Maybe even hack into their networks. The Velcrin, meanwhile, were experiencing their own crisis. News of the defeat had reached the Imperial homeworld, causing shock and outrage throughout the Empire. High Admiral Kreshevan was dispatched with the 5th Conquest Armada, the largest military force assembled in 3 centuries, 2,000 warships, carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet, all aimed at one primitive world that dared to resist. Kreshevan was old, even by Velcrin standards, a veteran of dozens of campaigns. He had never lost a battle. He studied the reports from Commander Velthar's expedition with growing anger and grudging respect. The humans were clever, vicious, and apparently willing to use weapons civilized species had abandoned. Nuclear devices, he muttered to his advisors. Chemical weapons, biological agents. They fight like animals. They are primitives, Admiral. They know nothing of the conventions of war. Then we will teach them, Kreshevan decided. But first, we will ensure this can never happen again. Full-spectrum shields on all ships, point defense systems upgraded, and we establish a complete blockade. If we cannot take their world quickly, we will starve them into submission. 6 weeks after the first battle, the 5th Conquest Armada arrived at Earth. The sheer scale of the fleet was overwhelming. 2,000 ships filled the space around Earth's moon, blotting out the stars. Every sensor on the planet screamed warnings. Every government went to maximum alert. They are not attacking, Captain Jinho reported from his ship. They are taking positions around the planet, creating a grid. General Taiyang understood immediately. They are blockading us. Nothing in or out. They will cut off our space assets, destroy our satellites, and wait for us to run out of resources. It was a sound strategy. Earth depended on space infrastructure more than most people realized. Communication satellites, weather monitoring, GPS navigation, all would be lost. And without the ability to reach orbit, humanity would be trapped on their own world. But the Velcrin made one critical mistake. They assumed Earth's space capability was limited to what they could see. They did not know about the secret programs, the experimental craft, the decades of black budget projects that had never been revealed to the public. Engineer Daiho had worked on those secret projects. Now he stood in a hidden facility in the mountains, looking at a spacecraft that officially did not exist. It was small, stealthy, built using technology derived from recovered UFOs that turned out to be Velcrin scout ships from previous reconnaissance missions. Will it fly? General Taiyang asked. It will fly, Daiho confirmed. The question is whether it can get through their blockade without being detected. It has to. We need intelligence on their fleet positions, their patrol patterns, anything that can help us break the blockade. The stealth ship launched at midnight, using terrain masking and electronic countermeasures to slip past Velcrin sensors. Pilot Sora had trained for years on this craft, never knowing if she would ever use it in actual combat. Now she threaded her way through the alien blockade, her instruments showing enemy ships all around her. "I am through the inner perimeter," she reported on the encrypted channel, gathering data now. What she saw terrified her. The Velcrin had positioned their ships in overlapping fields of fire. Any conventional attack would be detected and destroyed long before reaching the targets. But as she studied the formation, she noticed something. The aliens were focusing their attention outward, watching for attacks from the planet. They were not watching behind themselves. Back on Earth, this intelligence sparked a desperate idea. If they could not go through the blockade, maybe they could go around it. Captain Borum commanded a submarine that had been converted into a spacecraft using salvaged Velcrin technology. It was a mad hodgepodge of human and alien engineering, but the scientists swore it would work. "Our target is the Velcrin supply depot on the far side of the moon," Taeyang explained during the mission briefing. "They have been bringing in supplies and ammunition for the siege. If we can destroy that depot, we disrupt their logistics and force them to be more defensive." Borum looked at her crew of 20 volunteers. All of them knew this was likely a one-way mission. "When do we launch?" "Tomorrow night." "You will have one shot at this. Make it count." The mission launched under cover of a massive electromagnetic storm that Earth scientists had somehow managed to create artificially. Borum's makeshift spacecraft rose through the atmosphere, shaking and groaning but holding together. They reached space, oriented themselves, and began the burn toward the moon. Velcrin sensors detected them halfway through the journey. Alarms sounded on a dozen warships. "Unknown contact vectoring toward lunar orbit. Intercept and destroy," the duty commander ordered. But the little craft was fast and maneuverable, dodging and weaving through space in ways Velcrin ships could not match. Borum pushed the engines beyond their design limits, racing for the moon while enemy fire blazed around them. "Shields are failing," her engineer shouted. "We do not need shields," Borum replied grimly. "We just need to reach the target." They crashed more than landed, slamming into the surface of the moon near the Velcrin depot. The crew scrambled out in salvaged spacesuits carrying nuclear weapons and determination. They fought their way through light Velcrin security, placing charges throughout the massive storage facility. "Detonation in 60 seconds, Borum transmitted. "To anyone listening, this is Captain Borum. We did it. We hit them where it hurts." The depot exploded in a miniature sun, vaporizing months of Velcrin supplies and sending debris cascading across the lunar surface. Of Borum's crew of 20, only 3 survived to be recovered by a rescue mission days. Later, High Admiral Kreshevin watched the explosion from his flagship and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Doubt. These humans were not fighting like primitives. They were using tactics he recognized from wars between major powers. Asymmetric warfare, unconventional thinking, acceptable losses in pursuit of strategic goals. "They are adapting faster than we predicted," his chief strategist admitted. "Every time we think we understand them, they change their approach. Then we must be willing to use methods we have avoided," Kreshvin decided. "Prepare the pacification weapons. If we cannot conquer them conventionally, we will break their will to resist." On Earth, Dr. Soman worked in a biosafety laboratory with samples of Velcrin blood and tissue recovered from the dead. She was a biochemist, not a warrior, but she understood that this was war and all advantages had to be exploited. "Their biology is similar enough to ours that I can design pathogens that will affect them," she reported, "but different enough that humans should not be harmed." "Should not?" Taeyang questioned. "Biology is complicated. I can give you a weapon that will kill Velcrin, but I cannot guarantee it will not mutate or cross-contaminate. This is a Pandora's box. At this point, we need every weapon we can get. Begin production." The war entered a new and darker phase. Both sides began using weapons they had hoped never to deploy. Chemical agents, biological weapons, experimental devices that bent the rules of physics in dangerous ways. Millions died on both sides. Ships burned in orbit. Cities fell to bombardment. And still, neither side would surrender. General Taeyang stood in the ruins of what had once been a military command post, now destroyed by Velcrin orbital strikes. Around him, soldiers prepared for another wave of fighting. They were tired. Running. The siege lasted 6 months. Earth's cities darkened as power grids failed under constant bombardment. Supply chains collapsed. Food became scarce. Water rationing began in every major population center, but humanity refused to surrender. They adapted, improvised, and continued fighting with a stubbornness that baffled the Velcrin. In underground bunkers across the planet, civilians worked factories that produced weapons and ammunition. Children learned to recognize the sound of different Velcrin aircraft. Elderly people served as lookouts and messengers. Every human became part of the war effort because there was no other choice. Surrender meant slavery. Defeat meant extinction. Dr. Hyun had moved his laboratory even deeper underground after the surface facility was destroyed. Around him, a team of scientists from 24 nations worked on projects that would have seemed like fantasy a year ago. They were reverse engineering Velcrin technology, not just to understand it, but to use it against its creators. The gate technology, Hyun explained to General Taiyang during a secure video call. I think I understand how it works now. They tear a hole in space-time and stabilize it with exotic matter. The energy requirements are enormous, but the principles are surprisingly straightforward. Can we build our own gates? Taiyang asked. Maybe. Given time and resources we do not have. Hyun pulled up a display of calculations. But there is something more interesting. The gate they used to reach Earth, the one still open near Jupiter, it is unstable. The Velcrin are maintaining it through constant power input from their ships. If that power flow was interrupted, the gate would collapse. What would happen then? I am not completely sure. At best, they lose their supply line to their empire. At worst, the collapse creates a catastrophic spatial rupture that destroys everything within several light years. Taeyang absorbed this information grimly. So we could destroy them, but only by destroying ourselves in the process? Possibly. I need more data to be certain. Hyun hesitated. General, there is something else. While studying the gate technology, I discovered that we can trace the energy signature. We can figure out where the other end of the gate leads. We could potentially open our own gates to Velcrin space. For the first time in months, Taeyang allowed himself a smile. Now that is interesting. High Admiral Kreshevan was growing frustrated. The siege should have broken Earth's resistance by now. Every simulation, every analysis had predicted that cutting off their space access and bombarding their infrastructure would force surrender within 3 months. But 6 months later, the humans were still fighting, still launching desperate attacks, still refusing to accept the inevitable. Our supply situation is becoming critical, his logistics officer reported. The destruction of the lunar depot set us back significantly. We are consuming ammunition faster than it can be resupplied through the gate. Then we escalate further, Kreshevan decided. Prepare the tectonic disruptors. If conventional bombardment will not break them, we will trigger earthquakes across their major population centers. Admiral, those weapons are banned by the Galactic Council. Using them would be a war crime. The Council has not intervened in this conflict. As far as I am concerned, they have given us tacit approval to do whatever is necessary. Kreshevan stared at the image of Earth on his screen. These humans have cost the Empire thousands of lives and immeasurable resources. They will submit or they will be destroyed. Engineer Daeho had a new project. Using salvaged Velcrin components and human ingenuity, he was building something that should not be possible. A weapon platform disguised as orbital debris, equipped with railguns powerful enough to punch through upgraded Velcrin shields. The problem is power, he explained to his team. We need enough energy to fire the railguns, but any power source strong enough will be detected by their sensors. A young engineer named Heron raised her hand. What if we use the Velcrin's own power? Their ships emit enormous amounts of waste energy. We could design collectors that absorb that energy and store it in capacitors. Daeho stared at her. We would be stealing their power to shoot them? Yes, I love it. Start designing the collectors immediately. Over the following weeks, Earth launched dozens of objects into orbit, carefully disguised as debris from destroyed satellites. The Velcrin sensors detected them but dismissed them as harmless wreckage. The objects drifted closer to the alien ships, slowly positioning themselves throughout the blockade fleet. Captain Jinho, now commanding a small flotilla of converted civilian ships, watched the preparations from his position on the planet's surface. His orders were to wait for the signal, then attack with everything they had while the orbital platforms opened fire. It was another desperate gamble, but desperate gambits were all Earth had left. Squadron leader Yunji was preparing for the same battle from a different angle. Her squadron had been equipped with experimental spacecraft, barely tested vehicles that combined rocket engines with captured Velcrin propulsion systems. They were supposed to provide air cover during the ground-based assault. But Yunji had other ideas. If we can reach orbital altitude, she told her pilots during the briefing, we can attack the Velcrin ships from below while the platforms hit them from above. They will be caught in a crossfire. The spacecraft are not rated for that kind of stress, one pilot objected. Nothing we are doing is rated for this kind of stress, Yunji replied. But we are doing it anyway. Earth is counting on us. Dr. Soman's biological weapons had been deployed in limited strikes with mixed results. Some Velcrin crews suffered casualties. Others seemed immune, suggesting genetic diversity in the alien population. But every casualty, every ship forced to quarantine, every moment of confusion in the enemy ranks was a small victory. She sat in her laboratory, exhausted, staring at samples of a new pathogen she was developing. This one was more aggressive, more virulent. It would kill Velcrin faster and more efficiently. It would also be harder to control, more likely to mutate into something dangerous. Are we becoming monsters? Her assistant asked quietly. Somin did not have a good answer. We are becoming survivors. The morality of it can be judged after we win. If we lose, there will be no one left to judge anything. The attack began at dawn Earth time. Taeyang had coordinated forces across the entire planet to strike simultaneously. Every missile, every gun, every spacecraft Earth could still field launched toward the blockade fleet. The disguised orbital platforms activated, their capacitors full of stolen Velcrin energy. Railguns fired in rapid succession, sending solid projectiles at relativistic speeds toward the alien ships. The Velcrin shields designed for energy weapons struggled to deflect the kinetic impacts. Shields holding but weakening, a Velcrin sensor operator reported. Multiple impacts across the fleet. Yunji led her squadron up through the atmosphere, her experimental spacecraft shaking violently but climbing toward orbital altitude. Behind her, 11 other pilots followed, pushing their vehicles to the absolute limit. We are through the worst of it, she transmitted. Weapons free, engage targets of opportunity. The spacecraft's weapons were crude compared to Velcrin technology, but they worked. Missiles streaked toward alien vessels. Railgun rounds punched through armor. And for a brief, glorious moment, humanity held air superiority over their own planet. Captain Jinho's flotilla reached weapons range and opened fire. Nuclear warheads bloomed against Velcrin shields. Conventional missiles added to the chaos. The entire blockade fleet was under attack from multiple vectors, exactly as Taeyang had planned. High Admiral Kreshovan watched his tactical display with growing horror. The humans were using coordinated, sophisticated tactics. They had lured his fleet into complacency, then struck with overwhelming force from unexpected angles. Ships were dying. The blockade was failing. Deploy the tectonic disruptors, he ordered. Target their major cities. If they want a war of extinction, we will give them one. But before the order could be executed, something unexpected happened. The gate near Jupiter flickered. Energy readings spiked wildly. And then for just a moment it collapsed completely before restabilizing. On Earth, Dr. Hyun watched his instruments in amazement. It worked. The energy drain from the battle, combined with the stress we put on the gate with our electromagnetic interference, it almost collapsed the gate entirely. General Taeyang saw the opportunity immediately. Can we force a complete collapse? Yes, but Admiral, if we collapse the gate while the Velcrin fleet is still here, they will be trapped in our solar system with no way home. They will fight even harder with nothing left to lose. But they also will not be able to call for reinforcements, Taeyang countered. And if we can figure out how to open our own gates, we can take the fight to them. The decision was made. Earth committed to a strategy that was either brilliantly bold or catastrophically insane. They would trap the Velcrin fleet, defeat it through attrition, and then use captured technology to invade the Empire itself. Intelligence Officer Guri listened to intercepted Velcrin communications and heard the panic in their voices. They knew the gate was unstable. They knew they might be cut off from home. Some captains were calling for immediate withdrawal. Others demanded a final, decisive attack on Earth's population centers. They are fracturing, she reported to Taeyang. Their command structure K. The breakthrough came at 4 in the morning. Dr. Hyun had not slept in 3 days, surviving on coffee and determination. Around him, his team worked through exhaustion-induced mistakes and small triumphs, trying to understand technology that was centuries beyond their current knowledge. Then suddenly everything clicked into place. "I understand it now," he said, his voice hoarse. "The gate is not a machine. It is more like a living system. It needs constant attention, constant adjustment, or it becomes unstable. The Velcrin have to monitor it every moment, feeding it energy and making corrections." His assistant looked up from her own workstation. "Can we build one? Better. We can hijack theirs." Hyun pulled up the data they had collected from studying the Jupiter gate. "Every gate has a signature, a unique frequency. If we can generate that frequency and add our own modulation, we can create new exit points while using their infrastructure. We can open doors to anywhere their gates can reach. That would mean we could travel to Velcrin space. Not just travel. We could attack." Hyun felt the weight of what he was suggesting. "We could take the war to them." General Taeyang listened to Hyun's proposal with a mix of hope and fear. The idea was audacious, maybe insane. Earth was barely surviving the Velcrin siege. How could they possibly launch an offensive into enemy territory? "We do not have the forces for an invasion," he said. "We do not need an invasion," Intelligence Officer Gyuri countered. She had been studying Velcrin military doctrine and strategic vulnerabilities. "We need to break their will to fight. Right now, they think they are invincible. Their homeworlds have never been threatened. If we can strike at those worlds even in small ways, we change the entire psychological dynamic of the war." She is right, Taeyang realized. The Velcrin came to Earth expecting an easy conquest. Every setback has shocked them. But their empire itself has never been at risk. If we make them vulnerable, if we bring the war to their civilians, they will have to reconsider whether Earth is worth the cost. "That is terrorism," someone objected. "That is war," Taeyang replied coldly. "They have bombed our cities. They have killed millions of our civilians. We will do the same to them, and we will keep doing it until they leave or until one of us is extinct." The first test of the new gate technology was small and cautious. Commander Minho volunteered to lead a team of 12 soldiers through an experimental portal. Their target was a Velcrin mining facility on a minor colony world, chosen because it would be lightly defended but strategically important. "Remember," Ewan briefed them before they left. "The gate is unstable. You have 6 hours maximum before it collapses. If you are not back through by then, you will be stranded in Velcrin space with no way home." Minho nodded. 6 hours is more than enough time to blow up a mining facility. The gate opened with a flash of impossible light, showing a view of an alien world under a red sun. Minho and his team stepped through, traveling thousands of light years in a single step. The disorientation lasted only a moment, then training took over. They emerged in a storage area, empty and cold. Alarms had not sounded yet. The Velcrin had no idea humans were on their world. Minho led his team toward their objective, moving quietly through corridors that felt wrong in every way. Alien architecture, alien air, alien gravity slightly lighter than Earth's. "Charges set," his demolitions expert reported. "We have 15 minutes before detonation." They made it back to the gate point with 4 minutes to spare. The explosion behind them destroyed 3 months of mined resources and killed 17 Velcrin workers. It was a tiny victory in the scale of a galactic war, but the psychological impact was enormous. News spread through Velcrin space at the speed of their communication network. Humans had attacked a colony world. Humans had the ability to open gates. Nowhere in the Empire was safe anymore. Panic rippled through populations that had never feared war before. High Admiral Kreshevin received the reports with cold fury. "They have learned to use gate technology. That is impossible. They are primitives." "Apparently not as primitive as we believed, Admiral," his chief strategist said carefully. "Our intelligence severely underestimated human adaptability and learning speed. Then we accelerate our plans for Earth. If they can threaten our worlds, we must eliminate their world before they do more damage." But Kreshvin was too late. Commander Minho's successful mission had proven the concept worked. Within days, Earth was launching dozens of similar raids across Velcrin space. Small teams appeared without warning, struck at vulnerable targets, and disappeared before defenders could respond. A logistics hub was destroyed, cutting off supply lines to 3 military sectors. An orbital shipyard was sabotaged, setting back warship production by months. A communication relay was demolished, creating a blind spot in the Velkrin sensor network. Fleet Admiral Wanchik coordinated Earth's expanding offensive from a command center that had been moved 5 times to avoid Velkrin bombardment. He was a strategic thinker, a chess player who saw patterns where others saw chaos, and he saw that Earth had finally found a weapon the Velkrin could not easily counter. "We hit them everywhere at once," he explained to his staff. "Spread their forces thin. Make them defend 1,000 targets instead of attacking one. Every ship they pull back from the blockade to defend their territory is one less ship we have to fight here. We are also spreading our own forces thin," an aide objected. "True, but we are fighting for our survival. They are fighting to protect their comfort. Our soldiers know what happens if they fail. Their soldiers are starting to wonder if this war is worth the cost." The strategy worked better than anyone had hoped. Velkrin fleet elements began withdrawing from Earth orbit to defend home systems. The blockade weakened. Supply ships from Earth started reaching orbit again. The tide was turning, slowly but measurably. Dr. Somin's biological weapons evolved along with the war. Working with samples from multiple Velkrin populations, she created targeted pathogens that exploited species-wide vulnerabilities. These were deployed during the raids, spreading through Velkrin populations and causing casualties that no military defense could prevent. "We are winning," she told Dr. Hyun during one of their rare conversations. "But the cost of this victory is going to haunt us." "We will live to be haunted," Hyun replied. "That is better than the alternative." Engineer Daiho was overseeing the construction of Earth's first true warships, designed from the beginning to use both human and Velkrin technology. They were ugly, asymmetric vessels that looked like they had been assembled from spare parts, because they had been. But they worked, and more importantly, they gave Earth the ability to take and hold positions in space. Captain Jinho transferred from his converted destroyer to one of these new warships, a vessel designated the Defender. He stood on the bridge, still not entirely believing he was commanding a spacecraft capable of faster-than-light travel. "All stations report ready," his executive officer said. "Then let us go hunting," Jinho ordered. "The Velkrin have been hunting us for long enough. Time to turn the tables." The Defender and 3 sister ships transited through a human-controlled gate and emerged in a Velkrin patrol sector. The alien ships detected them immediately and moved to intercept. But the human ships were faster, more maneuverable, and crewed by people who had been fighting for their lives for over a year. The engagement lasted 47 minutes. All 4 Velkrin patrol ships were destroyed. The human vessels took damage but survived. More importantly, they had proven that Earth could fight and win in space far from home. Squadron leader Yoonji led fighter attacks through gates, striking at Velkrin installations with precision and fury. Her pilots had become the best combat pilots in human history out of necessity. Every mission was do or die. Every mistake was fatal, but they learned fast and adapted faster. "Target the shield generators first," she instructed during a raid on a Velkrin orbital platform. "Once the shields are down, missiles will do the rest." Her squadron executed the attack flawlessly. The platform was destroyed, denying the Velkrin a strategic position in a contested system. Yoonji led her pilots back through the gate. Another mission successful, another small piece of the Empire chipped away. Commander Minho's raids grew more ambitious. His team started targeting not just infrastructure, but also capturing Velkrin technology and intelligence. Computers were seized. Scientists were extracted. Entire research facilities were looted for their data. One raid hit a Velkrin naval academy, attacking while the next generation of their officers was in training. The psychological impact was severe. Young Velkrin, who thought they were preparing for hypothetical future conflicts, suddenly faced real combat against humans who fought without mercy. The Galactic Council, which had remained neutral throughout the conflict, finally began to take notice. Reports flooded in from across Velkrin space of human attacks. The species that had been classified as a Class 7 primitive civilization was systematically dismantling one of the galaxy's major powers. "We must intervene," some council members argued. "This conflict is destabilizing the entire region." "On whose behalf?" others countered. "The Velkrin started this war. They opened the gate to Earth. They issued the ultimatum. The humans are simply defending themselves very effectively." While the council debated, Earth continued attacking. General Taeyang implemented a strategy of deliberate ease. The gathering of the Velcrin fleet was visible from Earth even without telescopes. 5,000 warships, the largest military force assembled in the Empire's history, converged on the solar system. High Admiral Kreshovin had recalled every ship from every border, stripped defenses from every sector, and committed everything to one final assault. Earth would fall, or the Velcrin Empire would fall. There was no middle ground anymore. Fleet Admiral Wanshik watched the enemy fleet approach and reviewed his own forces. Earth had perhaps 300 combat-capable vessels. A mixture of converted civilian craft captured Velcrin ships and the new hybrid warships built from both technologies. The disparity was staggering. But Wanshik had not survived a year of warfare by fighting fair. They expect us to defend Earth directly, he told his command staff. They expect a conventional battle where their numbers will overwhelm us. So we will not give them that battle. What do you propose instead? General Taeyang asked from his own command post. We let them come to Earth. We let them commit to their assault. And while they are here, we destroy everything they value in Velcrin space. Every shipyard, every military base, every seat of government. We make them choose between conquering Earth and saving their own civilization. That will require gates to dozens of systems simultaneously, Dr. Hyun said. The power requirements alone would drain Earth's entire energy grid. Then drain it, Wanshik replied. We are not going to need power plants if we lose this war. Commit everything to opening as many gates as we can. The plan was approved because there was no better alternative. Earth would stake everything on one massive coordinated offensive across Velcrin space while simultaneously defending against the largest invasion force ever. Assembled Commander Minho was given operational command of the multi-system assault. He divided Earth's special forces into 50 strike teams, each assigned a critical target in Velcrin territory. Some would attack military installations, others would hit industrial centers. A few had orders to strike at the Empire's political leadership directly. We are going to cut off the head while they try to destroy our body, Minho explained to his team leaders. Speed is everything. Hit your targets, cause maximum damage, and extract before their defenses can respond. We only get one chance at this. Major Hana led one of those teams. Her target was a Velcrin weapons research facility rumored to house their most advanced and terrible weapons. Intelligence suggested the Velcrin had developed planet-killing technology, temporal weapons, even devices that could unravel reality itself. Earth could not allow these weapons to be deployed. Our orders are to seize any information we can and destroy everything else, she briefed her squad. The Velcrin are desperate enough to use weapons that violate every galactic law. We need to know what they have before they use it on us. The offensive began with precision timing. Gates opened across Velcrin space simultaneously, appearing near targets that had never been threatened before. Human strike teams emerged from impossible portals and attacked with practiced efficiency. On the Velcrin homeworld, a government complex was bombed during a session of their High Council. On their primary naval base, fusion reactors were sabotaged, causing cascading failures across the facility. On their largest shipyard, construction frames collapsed, destroying vessels that had been years in the making. The psychological impact was even greater than the physical damage. The Velcrin people, who had never experienced war on their own worlds, suddenly found themselves under attack. Billions of civilians who had supported the war as an abstract concept now faced the reality of combat. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Major Hana's team infiltrated the weapons research facility by posing as Velcrin scientists. Their disguises were crude, relying more on confusion and misdirection than actual believability, but they worked long enough to get inside. Charges planted in the main laboratory, her demolitions expert reported. But sir, you need to see what they were working on. Hana looked at the displays showing weapon designs and test results. Planet crackers that could split a world along tectonic fault lines, temporal disruptors that could age targets to dust in seconds, and something called a reality anchor, which the documentation claimed could collapse the quantum uncertainty that held matter together. They built these weapons? She asked in horror. Built them and were preparing to deploy them against Earth, her tech specialist confirmed, accessing the facility's computers. Orders were issued 3 days ago to begin loading them onto the assault fleet. Download everything, Hana ordered. Every schematic, every test result, every piece of data. Earth scientists need to know what we are facing. The facility exploded behind them as they retreated through the gate, but the information they carried was more valuable than the destruction they caused. Earth now knew exactly how far the Velkrin were willing to go. At Earth itself, the Velkrin assault fleet arrived to find a planet that appeared poorly defended. Only a few dozen ships held orbit, and those seemed to be positioned randomly rather than in any coherent defensive formation. High Admiral Kreshevan smiled with grim satisfaction. The humans had overextended themselves with their raids. Now they would pay the price. All ships advance, he ordered. Target their orbital platforms, their satellite networks, and any vessel that resists. Once space is secured, we begin the planetary bombardment. The Velkrin fleet surged forward, confident in their overwhelming numbers. And then Earth sprang its trap. The randomly positioned human ships suddenly coordinated, revealing themselves as bait. Orbital platforms that had appeared disabled powered up and opened fire. Gates opened throughout the solar system, and ships that had been hiding in other locations suddenly appeared behind the Velkrin formation. Captain Jinho commanded one wing of the ambush, his warship, the Defender, leading a squadron of smaller vessels. Target their command ships first, he ordered. Break their coordination, and the whole fleet becomes confused. Squadron leader Yunji led fighter attacks from multiple vectors, her pilots weaving between capital ships and striking at vulnerable systems. The fighters were tiny compared to the Velkrin warships, but they were fast and maneuverable, and they knew every weak point in Velkrin ship design. The battle was chaos on a scale no human had ever imagined. Thousands of ships exchanged fire across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Nuclear explosions blossomed like flowers. Energy beams carved through vacuum. Railgun projectiles crossed the battlefield at relativistic speeds. Ships died by the dozens every minute. Engineer Deho watched from Earth's surface as his orbital weapons platforms performed exactly as designed. Each platform had been built to function independently, making them impossible to disable all at once. They absorbed Velkrin fire, shrugged off damage that would cripple traditional stations, and kept shooting until they were completely destroyed. Platform 7 is gone, an operator reported. Redirect Platform 8 to cover its sector, Deho ordered calmly. They had known the platforms would die. The question was how many enemy ships they could take with them. Dr. Hyun monitored the gates that were holding open across dozens of systems. The power drain was enormous, pushing Earth's energy grid beyond its design limits. Blackouts were rolling across the planet as resources were diverted to maintaining the portals. But if they closed the gates now, the strike teams would be stranded. We can hold for another 2 hours, he reported to General Taeyang. After that, we risk catastrophic grid failure. Tell the strike teams they have 90 minutes to complete their missions and return, Taeyang ordered. After that, we close the gates whether they are back or not. Commander Minho received the update and accelerated his operations. Some teams had already completed their objectives and were returning through the gates. Others were still engaged with Velkrin defenders. A few had gone silent, their fate unknown. All teams, this is command, Minho broadcast on the encrypted channel. You have 90 minutes to reach your extraction points. We cannot hold the gates open longer. If you are not through by then, you will be on your own. Complete your missions and get home. Major Hana's team was fighting their way to their extraction point, pursued by Velkrin security forces who had finally responded to the attack. They had the data about the forbidden weapons, but they still had to survive long enough to deliver it. Gate is 30 seconds away, her navigator called out, but we have hostiles closing from behind. Then we fight through them, Hana decided. This information is too important to lose. Move. Her squad opened fire, advancing toward the gate while engaging the pursuers. 2 of her soldiers fell. Another was wounded but kept moving. They reached the gate with seconds to spare, diving through the portal as Velkrin weapons fire sizzled past them. Back at Earth, the space battle had reached a critical point. The Velkrin still had more ships, but they had lost their cohesion. Admiral Wanshik had correctly predicted that destroying their command vessels would shatter their coordination. Now the Velkrin fleet was a collection of individual ships rather than an organized force. High Admiral Kreshevan watched his tactical displays with growing desperation. The ambush had cost him hundreds of ships already. The human orbital defenses were more effective than anticipated, and reports were flooding in from across the empire of... The gathering of the Velkrin fleet was visible from Earth even without telescopes. 5,000 warships, the largest military force assembled in the Empire's history, converged on the solar system. High Admiral Kreshovan had recalled every ship from every border, stripped defenses from every sector, and committed everything to one final assault. Earth would fall, or the Velkrin Empire would fall. There was no middle ground anymore. Fleet Admiral Wanchik watched the enemy fleet approach and reviewed his own forces. Earth had perhaps 300 combat-capable vessels, a mixture of converted civilian craft, captured Velkrin ships, and the new hybrid warships built from both technologies. The disparity was staggering, but Wanchik had not survived a year of warfare by fighting fair. They expect us to defend Earth directly, he told his command staff. They expect a conventional battle where their numbers will overwhelm us. So we will not give them that battle. What do you propose instead? General Taiyang asked from his own command post. We let them come to Earth. We let them commit to their assault. And while they are here, we destroy everything they value in Velkrin space. Every shipyard, every military base, every seat of government. We make them choose between conquering Earth and saving their own civilization. That will require gates to dozens of systems simultaneously, Dr. Hyun said. The power requirements alone would drain Earth's entire energy grid. Then drain it, Wanchik replied. We are not going to need power plants if we lose this war. Commit everything to opening as many gates as we can. The plan was approved because there was no better alternative. Earth would stake everything on one massive coordinated offensive across Velkrin space while simultaneously defending against the largest invasion force ever. Assembled Commander Minho was given operational command of the multi-system assault. He divided Earth's special forces into 50 strike teams, each assigned a critical target in Velkrin territory. Some would attack military installations, others would hit industrial centers. A few had orders to strike at the Empire's political leadership directly. We are going to cut off the head while they try to destroy our body, Minho explained to his team leaders. Speed is everything. Hit your targets, cause maximum damage, and extract before their defenses can respond. We only get one chance at this. Major Hana led one of those teams. Her target was a Velkrin weapons research facility rumored to house their most advanced and terrible weapons. Intelligence suggested the Velkrin had developed planet-killing technology, temporal weapons, even devices that could unravel reality itself. Earth could not allow these weapons to be deployed. Our orders are to seize any information we can and destroy everything else, she briefed her squad. The Velkrin are desperate enough to use weapons that violate every galactic law. We need to know what they have before they use it on us. The offensive began with precision timing. Gates opened across Velkrin space simultaneously, appearing near targets that had never been threatened before. Human strike teams emerged from impossible portals and attacked with practiced efficiency. On the Velkrin homeworld, a government complex was bombed during a session of their High Council. On their primary naval base, fusion reactors were sabotaged, causing cascading failures across the facility. On their largest shipyard, construction frames collapsed, destroying vessels that had been years in the making. The psychological impact was even greater than the physical damage. The Velkrin people, who had never experienced war on their own worlds, suddenly found themselves under attack. Billions of civilians who had supported the war as an abstract concept now faced the reality of combat. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Major Hana's team infiltrated the weapons research facility by posing as Velkrin scientists. Their disguises were crude, relying more on confusion and misdirection than actual believability, but they worked long enough to get inside. Charges planted in the main laboratory, her demolitions expert reported. But sir, you need to see what they were working on. Hana looked at the displays showing weapon designs and test results. Planet crackers that could split a world along tectonic fault lines, temporal disruptors that could age targets to dust in seconds, and something called a reality anchor, which the documentation claimed could collapse the quantum uncertainty that held matter together. They built these weapons? She asked in horror. Built them and were preparing to deploy them against Earth, her tech specialist confirmed, accessing the facility's computers. Orders were issued 3 days ago to begin loading them onto the assault fleet. Download everything, Hana ordered. Every schematic, every test result, every piece of data. Earth scientists need to know what we are facing. The facility exploded behind them as they retreated through the gate, but the information they carried was more valuable than the destruction they caused. Earth now knew exactly how far the Velkrin were willing to go. At Earth itself, the Velcrin assault fleet arrived to find a planet that appeared poorly defended. Only a few dozen ships held orbit, and those seemed to be positioned randomly rather than in any coherent defensive formation. High Admiral Kreshevan smiled with grim satisfaction. The humans had overextended themselves with their raids. Now they would pay the price. All ships advance, he ordered. Target their orbital platforms, their satellite networks, and any vessel that resists. Once space is secured, we begin the planetary bombardment. The Velcrin fleet surged forward, confident in their overwhelming numbers. And then Earth sprang its trap. The randomly positioned human ships suddenly coordinated, revealing themselves as bait. Orbital platforms that had appeared disabled powered up and opened fire. Gates opened throughout the solar system, and ships that had been hiding in other locations suddenly appeared behind the Velcrin formation. Captain Jinho commanded one wing of the ambush, his warship, the Defender, leading a squadron of smaller vessels. Target their command ships first, he ordered. Break their coordination, and the whole fleet becomes confused. Squadron leader Yunji led fighter attacks from multiple vectors, her pilots weaving between capital ships and striking at vulnerable systems. The fighters were tiny compared to the Velcrin warships, but they were fast and maneuverable, and they knew every weak point in Velcrin ship design. The battle was chaos on a scale no human had ever imagined. Thousands of ships exchanged fire across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Nuclear explosions blossomed like flowers. Energy beams carved through vacuum. Railgun projectiles crossed the battlefield at relativistic speeds. Ships died by the dozens every minute. Engineer Deho watched from Earth's surface as his orbital weapons platforms performed exactly as designed. Each platform had been built to function independently, making them impossible to disable all at once. They absorbed Velcrin fire, shrugged off damage that would cripple traditional stations, and kept shooting until they were completely destroyed. Platform 7 is gone, an operator reported. Redirect Platform 8 to cover its sector, Deho ordered calmly. They had known the platforms would die. The question was how many enemy ships they could take with them. Dr. Hyun monitored the gates that were holding open across dozens of systems. The power drain was enormous, pushing Earth's energy grid beyond its design limits. Blackouts were rolling across the planet as resources were diverted to maintaining the portals. But if they closed the gates now, the strike teams would be stranded. We can hold for another 2 hours, he reported to General Taeyang. After that, we risk catastrophic grid failure. Tell the strike teams they have 90 minutes to complete their missions and return, Taeyang ordered. After that, we close the gates whether they are back or not. Commander Minho received the update and accelerated his operations. Some teams had already completed their objectives and were returning through the gates. Others were still engaged with Velcrin defenders. A few had gone silent, their fate unknown. All teams, this is command, Minho broadcast on the encrypted channel. You have 90 minutes to reach your extraction points. We cannot hold the gates open longer. If you are not through by then, you will be on your own. Complete your missions and get home. Major Hana's team was fighting their way to their extraction point, pursued by Velcrin security forces who had finally responded to the attack. They had the data about the forbidden weapons, but they still had to survive long enough to deliver it. Gate is 30 seconds away, her navigator called out, but we have hostiles closing from behind. Then we fight through them, Hana decided. This information is too important to lose. Move. Her squad opened fire, advancing toward the gate while engaging the pursuers. 2 of her soldiers fell. Another was wounded but kept moving. They reached the gate with seconds to spare, diving through the portal as Velcrin weapons fire sizzled past them. Back at Earth, the space battle had reached a critical point. The Velcrin still had more ships, but they had lost their cohesion. Admiral Wanshik had correctly predicted that destroying their command vessels would shatter their coordination. Now the Velcrin fleet was a collection of individual ships rather than an organized force. High Admiral Kreshevan watched his tactical displays with growing desperation. The ambush had cost him hundreds of ships already. The human orbital defenses were more effective than anticipated, and reports were flooding in from across the empire of. The Jupiter Gate began to collapse in a way that defied normal physics. Dr. Hyun had never been entirely certain what would happen when he overloaded the exotic matter containment, and now he watched in fascination and terror as reality itself started to tear. The gate expanded instead of contracting, creating a whirlpool of distorted spacetime that pulled at everything nearby. The Velcrin fleet near Jupiter is being drawn toward the rupture, an operator reported. They are trying to escape, but the gravitational effects are too strong. High Admiral Kreshevin sat in his quarters aboard his damaged flagship, staring at reports of riots across Velcrin worlds. The population was turning against the military leadership that had promised an easy victory and delivered instead a catastrophic defeat. His career was over. His legacy would be as the admiral who lost to primitives. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from Imperial Command," his communications officer reported. "They are ordering your immediate return to face court-martial." Kreshevin almost laughed. Court-martial for what? Following orders? Trying to win an unwinnable war? He had done everything the Empire asked of him and more. The failure was not his alone. It was the Empire's failure, born from centuries of arrogance and assumption of superiority. "Ignore the order," he said. "Open a channel to the human fleet. I wish to negotiate surrender terms." The negotiations took place aboard the Defender, Captain Jinho's warship. Kreshevin arrived with a small honor guard, looking diminished and defeated. General Taeyang and Fleet Admiral Wanshik represented Earth, with Ambassador Chaewon present via video link from the Council chambers. "We accept your surrender," Taeyang said formally. "All Velcrin forces in Earth space will disarm immediately. Your ships will be interned. Your crews will be treated according to the conventions of war." "What about our people on your prison camps?" Kreshevin asked. "We have thousands of soldiers captured during the battles. They will be returned once a formal peace treaty is signed," Wanshik replied. "Earth does not take pleasure in keeping prisoners. We just want this war to end." "It is ended," Kreshevin said quietly. "The Empire has nothing left to fight with. Your raids destroyed our military infrastructure. Your attacks panicked our civilian population, and now the Council is preparing sanctions that will cripple what remains of our economy. You have won completely," Chaewon spoke from the video link. "The Council is voting now on Earth's membership status and the terms for Velcrin surrender. The outcome is no longer in doubt. Earth will be recognized as a sovereign civilization. The Velcrin will face restrictions and reparations, and the laws governing first contact will be reformed to prevent this from happening again." The vote came through hours later. Earth was granted full Council membership with a narrow majority. The Velcrin Empire was placed under Council supervision, required to dismantle most of their military forces and pay reparations to Earth for the damages caused. Several Velcrin officials were to be tried for war crimes, though Kreshevin himself was spared prosecution in exchange for his cooperation. "We did it," Taeyang said, almost unable to believe it. "We actually won." "We survived," Wanshik corrected. "Winning implies there was a good outcome. Look at the cost. The cost was staggering. Earth had lost over 200 million people in the fighting. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble. The environment had been poisoned by weapons that should never have been used. The psychological trauma would affect generations, and humanity had learned to wage war in ways that frightened even themselves. But they had survived. Against impossible odds, facing an enemy with vastly superior technology, humanity had fought and refused to surrender. They had adapted, innovated, and ultimately prevailed through sheer determination and willingness to do whatever was necessary. Commander Minho received orders to stand down his strike teams. After months of conducting raids across Velcrin space, the war was simply over. It felt anticlimactic, like a storm that suddenly stopped without warning. "What do we do now?" one of his soldiers asked. "We go home," Minho replied. "We help rebuild. We try to remember how to live in peace." Major Hana and her team were hailed as heroes for capturing the intelligence on Velcrin forbidden weapons, but she felt no pride, only exhaustion and relief that it was finished. Squadron leader Yunji landed her fighter for the last combat mission and climbed out feeling older than her years. She had lost too many friends, seen too much death. Peace would take time to adjust to. Dr. Hyun and Dr. Soman stood together, looking at the night sky where the Velcrin fleet had once hung like a sword over Earth. Now there were only human ships and the slow work of recovery. "We changed everything," Hyun said. "Humanity's place in the galaxy, our understanding of what we are capable of. The price of that change was almost too high. But we paid it and survived," Soman replied. "That has to mean something." The Galactic Council's recognition of Earth as a member civilization opened doors that had seemed impossible a year earlier. Trade agreements were negotiated. Scientific exchanges were established. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists to develop new technologies that benefited both. But there was also fear. The other species had seen what humanity could do when threatened. They had watched a primitive world defeat a galactic empire through sheer ferocity and innovation. Some welcomed Earth as a valuable ally. Others worried about what would happen if humanity ever turned that military capability toward conquest. Ambassador Chewan addressed those concerns in her first speech as Earth's Council representative. We did not choose this war. It was forced upon us. But we learned from it. We learned that the galaxy is dangerous, that peace is fragile, that freedom must be defended. We will never again allow ourselves to be vulnerable, but we will also never become the aggressors. We fought for the right to exist on our own terms. We will extend that same right to others. The words were carefully chosen, reassuring, but with an underlying warning. Earth would not start wars, but Earth would finish them. The galaxy would have to accept humanity as an equal, or humanity would make them accept it. Counselor Mujin worked tirelessly to establish Earth's place in galactic politics. He negotiated treaties, formed alliances, and slowly built a network of relationships that would protect Earth from future threats. It was delicate work, balancing strength with diplomacy. The Velkrin made a mistake, he told Chewan during one planning session. They saw weakness and attacked. We need to ensure no one else makes that mistake. Earth must be strong enough that conquest is unthinkable, but open enough that others see us as partners rather than threats. It was a difficult balance, but humanity had learned to walk difficult paths. The species that had survived ice ages and plagues, world wars, and near extinction adapted once again to new circumstances. The war ended not with celebrations, but with exhaustion and relief. The killing stopped. The reconstruction began, and slowly, painfully, humanity started to heal. Reshevan saw the danger immediately and ordered his ships to retreat at maximum velocity. But hundreds of Velkrin vessels were already too close, caught in the gate's death spiral. They tumbled toward the collapsing portal, their hull plating warping from the tidal forces. Some ships simply tore apart. Others vanished into the gate itself, transported to random locations across the galaxy or perhaps destroyed entirely. Shut down the reality anchors, Kreshevan screamed. All power to engines! Get us away from that thing. The reality anchor weapons deactivated, their field generators shutting down just seconds before they would have reached critical threshold. Earth had been moments away from molecular disintegration, saved only by the desperation of the enemy fleet, trying to escape the collapsing gate. Captain Jinho watched from the Defender as Velkrin ships fled in every direction, all formation and discipline abandoned. All ships pursue, he ordered. Do not let them regroup. The human fleet, smaller but faster and more coordinated, hunted the scattered Velkrin vessels. It was not a battle anymore. It was a massacre. Ships that had come to destroy Earth were now trying desperately just to escape the solar system alive. Squadron leader Yunji's fighters picked off stragglers, targeting engines and life support systems. Her voice was calm as she directed her pilots even as they inflicted terrible casualties. Stay focused. Stay professional. We end this today. The Jupiter gate finally collapsed completely, releasing a pulse of energy that washed across the entire solar system. On Earth, every electrical system flickered. Satellites went offline briefly. The aurora borealis appeared at latitudes where it had never been seen before, shimmering across the sky in impossible colors. When the sensors cleared, the gate was gone. The Velkrin's connection to their empire was severed. Any ships that remained in the solar system were trapped, there with no hope of reinforcement or escape. High Admiral Kreshevan's flagship was one of perhaps 300 Velkrin vessels that survived the retreat. They limped away from Earth, damaged and defeated, while behind them the human fleet maintained pursuit. The Empire's greatest military force had been shattered in a single battle. Send a message to Imperial Command, Kreshevan ordered quietly. Tell them we have failed. Tell them Earth cannot be conquered. But Imperial Command was not listening. The messages from Earth space arrived simultaneously, with reports from across the Empire of the coordinated human attacks. Shipyards dests. 5 years after the war ended, Earth looked very different. The scars remained visible in rebuilt cities where new architecture stood beside ruins preserved as memorials. But life had returned. Markets bustled. Children played. The sky was clear of warships, filled instead with commercial traffic traveling to and from orbital stations. Dr. Huen stood in his new laboratory, part of an international research complex dedicated to advancing human understanding of gate technology and other alien sciences. Around him, scientists from every nation and several alien species worked together on projects that would have been impossible before the war. "We have stabilized the gate. Mechanics completely," he reported during a presentation to the Earth Coalition Science Council. "We can now open portals safely to any location we have coordinates for, with minimal power requirements and no risk of catastrophic collapse, which means humanity can travel freely throughout the galaxy," a council member noted. "How do the other species feel about that?" "Nervous," Hyun admitted. "They remember what we did to the Velcrin, but they also recognize that trying to restrict our access to gate technology would likely start another war, one they would prefer to avoid. The galaxy had learned to accommodate humanity's presence through a combination of respect and caution. Trade flourished because Earth offered unique products and perspectives. Diplomatic relations remained cordial because no one wanted to provoke the species that had defeated the Velcrin Empire. But underlying everything was an awareness that humanity was dangerous when threatened. Secretary General Subin represented Earth in the Galactic Council now, having been elected to lead the coalition government that unified humanity without eliminating national identities. She was a skilled diplomat, managing the difficult balance between Earth's interests and galactic politics. "We must be careful not to repeat the Velcrin's mistakes," she often reminded her advisors. "They became arrogant, believed themselves superior, and it destroyed them. We won our war through desperation and innovation. If we become comfortable, if we stop pushing ourselves to improve, we become vulnerable again." Under her leadership, Earth maintained a significant military force but focused primarily on defense and deterrence. The fleet that had fought the Velcrin was expanded and modernized, incorporating the best of human and alien technology. Admiral Wanshik commanded this fleet, ensuring that humanity would never again be caught unprepared. "We do not seek to conquer anyone," Wanshik explained during a recruitment speech. "But we will never again allow anyone to threaten Earth. Our mission is to protect, to deter, and if necessary, to respond with overwhelming force to any aggression." The fleet's ships bore names that honored those who had died in the war. The Defender, Captain Jinho's vessel, became the flagship. New ships were named after fallen heroes, lost cities, and critical battles. Each ship was a floating memorial, and a promise that the sacrifices would not be forgotten. Captain Jinho himself had become something of a legend, the naval officer who transitioned from commanding ocean vessels to commanding spacecraft. He trained the new generation of Space Force officers, passing on lessons learned in the hardest possible school of warfare. "Space combat is three-dimensional chess played at relativistic speeds," he told his students. "But the principles of warfare remain constant. Know your enemy, know yourself, strike where they are weak, defend what cannot be lost, and never ever underestimate an opponent." Squadron leader Yoonji took a different path after the war. She retired from active combat duty and became an instructor, teaching fighter tactics to pilots from Earth and allied species. Her experiences fighting against superior technology made her uniquely qualified to train others in asymmetric warfare. "We won because we refused to fight the way they expected," she explained during training exercises. "We were smaller, faster, more desperate. We took risks that seemed insane because the alternative was extinction. That mindset, that willingness to do the impossible, that is what I teach you." Her students came from across the galaxy, species that recognized the value of learning from humanity's experience. Yoonji was tough but fair, pushing her pilots to their limits while keeping them alive. The best ones learned to think like humans, to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. Commander Minho found himself working in intelligence and special operations, coordinating responses to threats that required subtlety rather than overwhelming force. His raid teams had been disbanded after the war, but the skills and tactics they developed remained relevant. "The galaxy is not at peace," he told a gathering of intelligence officers. "It is simply not at war. There are pirates, terrorists, rogue states, and a dozen other threats. Our job is to address those threats before they become existential dangers like the Velcrin." His work took him across known space, building relationships with other intelligence agencies, and occasionally conducting operations that never made it into official records. It was dangerous, often thankless work, but it kept Earth safe. Major Hanna led a team focused on monitoring and countering forbidden weapons technology. The intelligence she had captured from the Velkrin research facility had revealed that other species had developed similarly terrible weapons. Her mission was to ensure those weapons were never used. "We cannot uninvent these technologies," she admitted during a council briefing, "but we can make it clear that using them would bring immediate and overwhelming retaliation. Deterrence through assured destruction, applied on a galactic scale." It was a grim job, but Hanna approached it with the same dedication she had shown during the war. The galaxy was safer because she and her team stood watch over the worst weapons ever created. Engineer Daiho became famous for his ship designs, creating vessels that combined human engineering philosophy with alien technology. His ships were not always pretty, but they worked reliably and could take tremendous punishment while continuing to fight. "Beauty is fine for peacetime," he said when critics complained about his aesthetics. "But in war, I want something that will bring my crews home alive." Form follows function, and the function is survival. His shipyards produced vessels for Earth's fleet and for export to allied species. Some of the galaxy's best warships now bore human design elements, incorporating lessons learned in the war against the Velkrin. Dr. Salman had left weapons research after the war, unable to continue creating tools of death. Instead, she focused on medicine and biology, working to cure diseases and improve life across multiple species. Her expertise in genetics and biochemistry found peaceful applications that benefited billions. "I created things that killed during the war," she told a journalist interviewing her. "Now I create things that heal. It does not erase what I did, but it helps me sleep at night." Her research earned her the Nobel Prize and several galactic equivalents. She used her fame to promote scientific cooperation and to warn against the militarization of biological research. Intelligence Officer Guri worked alongside Counselor Mujin, providing the information necessary for effective diplomacy. She had an uncanny ability to understand alien psychology and predict political developments. Her insights had prevented several conflicts from escalating into wars. "The galaxy is full of species with different values, different priorities, different fears," she explained. "Understanding those differences is crucial to maintaining peace. We cannot expect others to think like humans. We must learn to think like them." The memorials to the war were sobering places. The largest stood in what had been Seoul, a massive monument listing the names of every human who died in the conflict. 200 million names carved in stone, a reminder of the cost of survival. Ambassador Minji, who had started it all by refusing the Velkrin ultimatum, often visited the memorial. She had been criticized for her decision, blamed by some for the deaths that followed, but she stood by her choice. "Freedom is worth fighting for," she said at the 5th anniversary ceremony. "Worth dying for. Every name on this monument represents someone who understood that. They did not die in vain. They died so humanity could live free." The eternal flame at the center of the memorial burned constantly, fueled by a small fusion reactor. It would burn for thousands of years, a light in darkness, a promise that the dead would not be forgotten. General Taeyang had retired from active military service but remained an advisor to the coalition government. He watched the new generation of soldiers and officers with a mixture of pride and concern. They had not experienced the desperation of the war. They did not understand what humanity had been willing to do to survive. "We must pass on the lessons," he told one Sheikh during one of their regular meetings. "Not just the tactics and strategies, but the mindset. The understanding that sometimes survival requires doing terrible things, that freedom is never given, only taken and defended. The younger generation will face their own challenges," one Sheikh replied. "We cannot fight their battles for them. We can only prepare them as best we can and hope it is enough." The Velkrin Empire had slowly recovered under council supervision, but it was a shadow of its former self. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a cautious humility. Young Velkrin grew up learning about the war as a cautionary tale, a lesson in the dangers of underestimating others. Some Velkrin harbored resentment toward humanity, dreaming of revenge.